Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott. In fall of 2024, I released a review of the Viltrox Autofocus 28mm F4.5 chip lens for Sony. It was the most compact autofocus lens that I had ever reviewed, and one of the interesting pieces of feedback that I got in the aftermath of the release of my review was a lot of people saying, I would love to have a lens like that for Fuji. It struck me almost a little bit odd considering the fact that it was a full frame lens, but then later on when I was reviewing the Fujifilm XM5 and thinking, man, a lens like that, an incredibly compact lens like that would make a camera like the XM5 a truly pocketable camera. And all of a sudden it made a lot more sense to me. Obviously Viltrox was thinking along the same lines because here we are, 6 months later, and we have an X-mount version of this Viltrox AF 28mm F4.5. Now, it's only $99, but the question we're here to address is that $100 well spent if you're looking for something for your Fujifilm camera? Let's dive in, let's find out. One of the first things we need to address is that this is a full frame lens now on an APS-C body. So that means that the focal length is going to change because of the 1.5 times crop factor on the Fuji body. And so rather than 28 millimeters, this is now a 42 millimeter full frame equivalent lens. 42 millimeters, while it's not a traditional focal length, is really actually in a sweet spot that's a lot of fun to use. So I have no hesitation about recommending it as a focal length here. The aperture remains f4.5. Now, that is not a maximum aperture of f4.5, that is an aperture of f4.5. There is no adjustable aperture, it is f4.5 all the time. That is both the maximum and the minimum aperture. And so of course that comes with, some cons potentially. You don't have the ability to open the aperture up wider, neither do you have the ability to close it down to get more sharpness or a deeper depth of field. Essentially, they've tried to come up with a focal length and an aperture value that will work reasonably well in enough situations, but you do need to be aware of that. Also, this is an autofocus only lens. It's kind of ironic in that most lenses that I've seen that are anywhere near this compact are manual focus only. This is the opposite. There is, even though it's knurled all along the edges, it's not a focus ring, that's just grip and design. There is no manual focus here, so we need autofocus to really work because there is no manual focus to backstop it. It is incredibly compact. In fact, it's not really much bigger than what a rear lens cap would be. And to that end, it is not threaded for filters up front, neither does it have a front cap. Instead, we have this little lever that is a slide across the front that either opens or closes a protective cover over the front element of the optical design. Now, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any changes relative to what I saw on Sony, and there were concerns on Sony that does tend to be a bit of a vulnerability. And the reason for that is when you first turn on the camera, you'll see a quick pulse forward, and the same is true here on Fuji as the focus motor kind of calibrates and runs back and forth. The problem is that it seems to extend past the point where that actual cover comes in and would seal over the top, which means that if you have that cover closed, it means that there's the potential of those elements are kind of coming up, or that the actual focus group is coming up against that. And I haven't had any issues with it, but certainly it could be a potential vulnerability point. And it seems like the function here is the same as what we saw on the E-mount version. That was probably the chief thing that I saw in terms of complaints from people in terms of the optical design. Now, if you look at the front of the lens, there is a couple of new things here. First of all, over on, if you're facing it on the right side, whereas before it gave the sensor diagonal size for a full frame sensor, instead here it says APS-C frame. And so it's recognition that this is now an APS-C lens, so it still is, it's over-engineered for APS-C. The other thing over on the right side, or the left side if you're facing it, is the fact that there is a very slightly different minimum focus distance. On the E-mount version, full frame, it was 32 centimeters. Here it is 34 centimeters. So we have a little bit longer focus distance, minimum focus distance. But remember, the focal length is also behaving like 42 rather than 28 millimeters. So what I found is that you do end up with a significantly higher magnification amount. That was a weakness on the E-mount version. It's less of a weakness here because you get a more usable amount of magnification. And I actually felt like it performed pretty well there up close. And so overall, that's certainly a step in the right direction. Now, other than those minor changes to the front, the overall size of the lens is almost identical as before. It's still 60.3 millimeters in diameter, or 2.77 inches, and it is only 15.25 millimeters deep. And so the E-mount version was 15.3. So we've gone down a fraction of a millimeter here. And so that is 0.6 inches in terms of overall length. The lens weighs, as before, 60 grams or 2.11 ounces. So very small, very light. However, it doesn't feel cheaply made. It is all built around a metal mount. There's an aluminum alloy here. I will note there is the traditional USB-C port there on the actual lens mount to allow for firmware updates. And in case you happen to be curious, this lens doesn't seem to be compatible with the wireless firmware update through the Viltrox app. I can't get it to recognize that, and so that seems to be a feature that's reserved for their higher-end lenses at this point. There are 7 blades in the aperture iris, and those are designed to where they are, obviously there's only one aperture value, so they're not retracted, they show, and so they've kind of biased things here to where, while that does allow specular highlights, you will see the aperture blades. It does allow you to get also a little bit of a sun star effect. So it's, again, this lens is all about kind of compromising between the two extremes. There are no weather sealing on the lens itself. There is no buttons or switches, obviously, no manual focus ring. None of those things exist on this lens. But what we do have, while there's no weather sealing, we do have their HD Nano multi-layer coating on the front element, though obviously if you are traveling with the lens not being used, you're going to want to keep that window closed, and so it protects that front element a little bit more with that plastic shield. This lens is so incredibly compact when it's on the camera. I actually had it on a strap earlier today. I just had it slung around my back while I went cross-country skiing. And my companion, while I was cross-country skiing, they saw that I had a camera on, but they wondered if I'd remembered to put a lens on it, because this is so incredibly compact. It's basically like just having a front camera cap on there. It is incredibly small. So how about autofocus? This was really kind of the critical area for me, because Fuji's autofocus, even though I'm using one of their best cameras, it tends to be just less sophisticated than alternatives. And unfortunately, that does play out in a couple of areas. Some ways I was pleasantly surprised, other ways I had my unpleasant expectations met. So when it comes to the VCM focus motor, this was the first of their actual released lenses with the VCM. And so that's a voice coil motor. It's not a stepping motor. And that is what kind of drives me crazy here, because I saw on Sony it had stepless performance, as it should. It's not a stepping motor. Whether it was stills or video, it was just, a linear move back and forth between the subjects. For whatever reason on Fuji, I think it has to do with Fuji's autofocus system, there are some clear and obvious steps here, as I do even stills autofocus testing, going back and forth, back and forth. And so obviously, because it's not just one smooth linear jump from point A to point B, and there's those steps, it does slow down autofocus a little bit compared to what I saw on Sony. I did find that it was a little bit better outside, and maybe when there was more light to work with for the focus system, it could focus with a little bit more confidence. But anyway, it's clearly a step back in those tests. Focus motor remains very quiet, no problems there. Now on the positive side of things, I did find that autofocus continues to be very accurate, and so it was consistent. Whatever that I was focusing on, I got good consistency results, which obviously is incredibly important in a lens that doesn't have manual focus. You have to get accurate autofocus because you have no plan B to go to there. But fortunately, I didn't feel like I needed it. And by the way, that was true even at close focus distances, where it did an effective job there. Good eye tracking overall and good accuracy there. I actually found that on my XH2, which is what I'm testing on, I found like my real world results were better than in my formal test. I actually felt like autofocus worked fairly well, and so it made the transition fairly good when it comes to the still side of things. Unfortunately, on the video side of things, it's, as is typically the case on Fuji, it is a pretty clear step back from the Sony platform. So once again, we see those steps, like really obvious steps. I counted about 6 in a focus pull from point A to point B, whereas on Sony, that was a completely linear, just back and forth, back and forth. And so unfortunately, some very much visible steps, even though it's not a stepping motor. And there is some significant focus breathing. And so unfortunately, you can see breathing as a part of each one of those steps. It just kind of draws your attention to it even more. I did find pretty good results with my hand test in that at least focus was shifting with a reasonable amount of responsiveness from my hand to my eye and back and forth there. Out in real world results, again, it's there's kind of that obvious focus breathing, but at least in good light, there's less of those obvious steps. And so it does seem to be a light related issue when it comes to how much of that I'm seeing here on Fuji. I did find, as I did on Sony, because it is just so lightweight, I mean, typically you might have your kind of supporting hand, your left hand out on a lens. You can't really do that here because there's nothing that's protruding basically. And so you end up holding the camera, and it's a little bit harder to stabilize as a byproduct of that. And so I did find just a little bit more shakiness in some of my handheld footage for the simple reason that there's just not much to hang on to there. And so overall, I mean, autofocus got the job done, but it's certainly not top tier performance. And it unfortunately is not as sophisticated a focus experience as what I found on Sony. So how about the image quality? Obviously, the optical design itself is the same. There's 6 elements, 6 groups. 4 of those elements are more exotic elements, 2 of them extra low dispersion, 2 of them aspherical elements. Now, the MTF here, however, actually looks better than the full frame MTF did. And you can see in this comparison chart that I put together why. And that is because basically where things begin to go downhill in the MTF chart for the full frame is right at the cutoff of where the APS-C line is. And so because that image circle is smaller, a lot of the weakest part of the performance is outside of the crop of the image or the APS-C image there. And so in some ways, as we're going to see, in some ways performance is going to be better. In some ways, it's going to be challenged by the extreme high resolution that is here, particularly on the XH2 body for shooting on one of the 24 or 26 megapixel cameras. It's going to be less extreme than what I'm going to show in this particular video. As I noted with the Sony version of the lens, this is kind of an old school lens in that it doesn't seem to have as effective coatings as what modern lenses do. And so the contrast level and the look of images is really going to depend on the lighting conditions. I find in particular if there is side light or light right out of frame, it really causes an overall veiling or lifting of contrast. And so it certainly gives it a look, as you can see in this shot here. Now, if there is no directional light, like in this shot of a pie, you can see that contrast is much higher. And that gives kind of the dual nature of the lens. It's really going to depend on the lighting conditions. If you happen to like images with a warm glow, if you put light in the frame, you're definitely going to get that here in this landscape shot. You can definitely see what I'm talking about. Now, one of the, again, advantages of the APS-C crop is that I actually found that distortion was a little easier to correct in a clean fashion here, because while I added a little bit more distortion correction, it is because the corners were cut off. The corners got a little complex on full frame. So if I corrected the center to where it should be, it started to create some issues out on the corners. Because those corners are cut off, I can actually get a much more linear correction here. I only dialed in a -3. It's very negligible amount, but I was able to get basically a perfect correction even manually. I also found that there was less vignette. I got +77 on Sony, a +62 here. Not as much of the vignette gets cropped off because there probably is a little bit extra vignette because it was originally engineered for another platform and then ported over to Fuji. I found often with lenses like that, I get more vignette on a Fuji platform, but because it's, it's over-engineered for this, still there's less vignette because some of that vignette is cut off. And if you compare the correction between the two, you can see that the Fuji correction, even in manually correcting it, it just looks cleaner overall. There's less of that kind of inconsistency in coloration after the vignette correction, so good stuff there. I found that there was always low longitudinal chromatic aberrations. However, once again, because the extreme corners are cut off, I also found less lateral chromatic aberrations because the area of the frame most affected by that has been cropped away on the APS-C sensor. And so what we're going to find when we look at sharpness here is there's going to be a pro. The pro is that it's more consistent across the frame. Again, the weakest part of the image circle is cropped off. So now what is now the corner used to be mid-frame, basically. And so I do find that there's more consistency from center, mid-frame to corner. However, what I also found is that contrast just doesn't look as good. Again, this is extremely demanding at 40 megapixels, equivalent of over 90 megapixels on a full frame sensor. And so there is no 90 plus megapixel full frame sensor. It's just more demanding than this lens has ever had to face on Sony before. And so as a byproduct, it does look a little bit softer in general. At the same time, I found like images look really pretty good overall. And I don't think that image quality as far as resolution is really a problem. I think you're probably going to have more issues with contrast, again, depending on your lighting situation. The quality of the bokeh is okay here, but remember, you're not going to be able to get a lot of it. Best case scenario is if you're really close to your subject and the background is really far away. Situations like that are relatively rare, and so you're going to find that more often than not, a fair bit is going to be in focus. And so as a byproduct, you won't get a lot of bokeh, but again, the quality of it doesn't look too bad as you've seen in these images. Colors are good in general, I would say. The optical glass here is good. And I will also say on the flare front that if you're shooting kind of more traditionally, kind of directly into the light source, there is definitely some veiling, a bit of ghosting, not a lot of that, but it's kind of a more typical response, I would say. It's more when you're getting at angles where the lens behaves like it has very few coatings. And so that kind of creates the look. It has a unique rendering. Either you like it or you don't. It really depends on your personal aesthetics. So my conclusion is this. This is a fun lens that really makes a small Fuji body behave a lot like, say, X100 VI. I mean, it has that same kind of pared down minimalist approach to where you're not really having to think of much of anything about the camera. You kind of, or the lens, I should say. It's kind of just point and shoot, which means that you can focus more on composition, thinking about the lighting, thinking about the shot and creation of the shot, rather than thinking much about aperture or some of the other factors that might come into play with a more complex optic. So if that appeals to you, this lens is a lot of fun, and obviously it's extraordinarily portable. It's going to be a lens that I'm just going to throw into a bag often if I'm carrying Fuji because, who knows, maybe I'll pull it out. And if I don't pull it out, it's 60 grams. Who cares? And so as you can see, this is a lens that is a little bit quirky in some of its optical performances, but in general, it provided me with a lot of images that I thought were rather cool. And again, it's not about, I would say, any kind of clinical perfection here. This is more about the character of the lens and also the fact that you have a fully functional, tiny, tiny lens to attach on there. And if that appeals to you, well, this just might be the lens for you. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.